In Pali, the word dukkha is often used to refer to suffering, but in actuality, its closest translation is stress or unsatisfactoriness. And that makes sense, since when we suffer, it's certainly because things aren't unsatisfactory, aren't at all satisfactory, right? And the Buddha talked about suffering a lot. His whole focus actually was suffering and the end of suffering. It's the main event. Suffering is the center of 2,600 years of wisdom teachings. This talk might be called Suffering and the End of Suffering. And that's why we're here, right? We signed up for that. So if you bravely raised your hands, know that this is exactly what's supposed to happen. It's not always a vacation. Yeah. So this evening, we'll deepen our exploration of suffering. You know, only at a gathering of mindfulness practitioners do we have like hour-long talks on suffering. You know what I mean? A rich topic. So we're going to discuss the Four Noble Truths, which are foundational teachings on suffering, if there ever was one. And you have stuff on your handouts in regards to this. We'll also look a little differently at the Four Noble Truths from a different angle, which might help us to relate to them better. We'll talk about 4 different kinds of suffering, or 4 different kinds of dukkha. Particularly, there's just one kind of dukkha that can end, you know, because suffering and the end of suffering, there's quite a lot of kinds of suffering that we can have, but only one can end. And then we'll formulate 4 ways of working with suffering as it arises, both on retreat and in daily life. So 3 fours. The Four Noble Truths, 4 kinds of suffering, and 4 ways of working with suffering. Just reminded me when I said 3 fours. When my son was 4, we were in a Haagen-Dazs, store, and there were those freezers with ice creams, and there would be 3 sections with 4 tubs each. And he said, "Mom, 3 fours is 12, right?" When I saw that, it was 3 fours. I had that memory. My son is 26, so it was a really sweet memory just now. Yeah. So the Four Noble Truths. We spoke last night about the Buddha's journey and all of the self-flagellation and how he ended up finally letting go of striving, finally by sitting in meditation to watch his mind. Right? And that long sit, apparently it was 49 days. I'm not sure how anybody kept track of that over some centuries, but that's what the story goes, right? It ended in what we call enlightenment or awakening. He saw the truth, and when he came out of his meditation, he said, "I teach one thing and one thing alone, suffering and the end of suffering." And then he began to teach the Four Noble Truths, which is on your handout. I know many of you are familiar with, but after I review it a little bit, we'll look at it a little differently. So, first noble truth is that pain and difficulty are an immutable fact of life. It's a difficult journey. We talked some last night about it. Hardship, death, illness, old age, you name it. So many hard things, and we can't escape it. It's kind of like that saying, pain is inevitable, right? The second truth, though, is this one, and we talked about it last night too. Suffering is caused by clinging to pleasures, to things that we like or that feel good. Could be anything that we're seeking out that feels good. The third noble truth is simply that suffering can cease, literally cease, and permanently. The kind of suffering that's caused by clinging can cease. right? And that speaks to the phrase, suffering is optional. So there's the quote, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. It's really kind of a modern day Four Noble Truths quote. It's on a lot of bumper stickers, I think. And every time I see it, I think they must be a Buddhist. And that knowledge that suffering is optional is really wonderful news, because it's so freeing. Yeah. And it's truth two that's the critical one of all of these. Truth two. So I wanted to share some different words that relate to that second truth in a little known discourse. I love little known discourses. The Buddha used the word search to describe the source of suffering. He said there are three types of searches. The search for gratification, again, so that's what feels good, what we want. The search for being, and the search for a spiritual path. So search for gratification, those sense pleasures, as well as pleasant thoughts and emotions. The search for being is referring to searching for a self, an immutable self that's beyond time and change, something real and solid, someone. And then the search for a spiritual path is just that. We're all on a spiritual path, one way or the other, but so much of the time our search for a spiritual path is really kind of a sneaky way to actually have gratification in self, right? Because we think a spiritual path will bring us what feels good, and that will have us be a stronger self, right? You know, self-esteem, self-confidence. Right? So the spiritual path is tricky. It's insidious. So the Buddha said, a practitioner, concentrated, clearly comprehending, and mindful, that's all of you guys, knows searches. He knows the origin of searches and where they cease, and the path that leads to their full destruction. With the destruction of searches, a practitioner without longing has attained nibbana. A practitioner concentrated, clearly comprehending, and mindful knows searches, knows the origin of searches and where they cease, and the path that leads to their full destruction. With the destruction of searches, a practitioner without longing has attained nibbana. It's a different way to think about it, right? To know what you're searching for, what you're longing for. Because so much of our struggling is in these searches, these longings. With mindfulness, we get to see over and over again these habits, the same searches. Every day, the same searches. That's the advantage of retreat, because it all gets laid out if we've stabilized our mind enough. On retreat, there might even be a little window opening that allows that grip of clinging to loosen. Searching might become less prominent. So here on retreat, we have the chance to know searches and not to search. And when we release the searching, the body releases and relaxes, and the mind relaxes too. And he would go on to say that the third noble truth is the cessation of searching, so letting go of longing. And the fourth of the Four Noble Truths is the path to freedom from searching and suffering, and that path we call the Eightfold Path. And these can be quite dry, and we won't go into them here, but they're divided into groupings or prongs we talked about last night. The prongs of wisdom, discipline, and ethics. These are also in your handout just for fun. So that was the Four Noble Truths. Suffering, cause of suffering, cessation, and path. Four Noble Truths, right?